Hey, I'm Brooke Halliday, licensed professional clinical counselor and your host of Coloring Outside the Lines. I believe that we are the byproducts of our experiences and the environments in which we were raised, and most of us have earned a few scars from those things over the years. I've been making it my mission to help people learn to accept themselves and have compassion for everything that they've survived. Through deep and vulnerable conversations with some amazing women, you're going to hear about major moments in their life when they chose to color outside the lines and demonstrate firsthand just how capable we all are. So get ready to be inspired as we color outside the lines and make something beautiful. We are following up with Sophie and hearing the last part of her story this week. If you haven't listened to part 1 of Sophie's story, make sure you listen to that first. That way you understand the context for this episode.
They were like, it is very important for understanding. So they, as a functional medicine provider, they focus a lot on gut health and stuff like that. And so probiotics and all that. And so they have a method to their madness. Like I said, it was very scary right away. But once that initial program was over, which I think it lasted like 6 weeks, I started it in, a little longer. I started it in September and I finished it by December. And then you start adding food back in. But during that, they're also doing blood work. They are DOs, so it's not like they're just these people that kind of made up something on the side of the street. They have their education and they kind of went a different route than traditional medicine. So it was these 2 women that started this.
Were you optimistic, or were you like, this is a Hail Mary, I don't know what else to do, my doctors aren't giving me anything, this is...
Yeah, it was a Hail Mary because, I had gone to CTRM in the cities and they basically said, no, nothing we can see. What's wrong with you? I went to Mayo Clinic and they basically said, yeah, you're unlucky. Nothing we can do.
Oh my gosh. I would have throat punched somebody if they said that to me.
It was very frustrating. Yeah, it was very frustrating. And so I was just like, let's give this a try. They started just doing lots of tests, I guess is what it came down to. One of the tests came back saying that I had Lyme's disease. That is a controversial thing because when I went to Mayo and when I was seeing this doctor, it kind of overlapped. And so I brought my paperwork that the functional medicine doctor said to Mayo and said, hey, I have Lyme's. And they looked at that and like, no, we don't recognize this test that they do. Our test says you don't have Lyme's, you don't have Lyme. And they were kind of assholes. Honestly, I really didn't like them. Even if they're right, I don't know. But just their approach to basically making me feel stupid for believing these other doctors was very frustrating. And then they did a lot of thyroid tests and they diagnosed me with Hashimoto's, which is actually, it's not a thyroid disease, it's autoimmune disease. It's my thyroid thinking things are invading and fighting everything off. And so that Mayo did recognize, but didn't say hey, this is a cause for your losses. They basically just said there's no connection. We don't think it's that. Whatever, you can move on. So I had that loss I was seeing Dr. Corey. I got pregnant. She was not optimistic. She didn't want me to get pregnant yet. She was not he's I want you to we're going to figure things out first. Don't get pregnant. My body, I just get pregnant. And obviously I wasn't being very smart, I guess. But we got pregnant and we did the progesterone again, I think, and just did frequent tests of thyroid and blood and stuff. Ended up miscarrying again as I was moving. We were moving into our new house, or we were about to move into our new house. And I ended up miscarrying. I think it was I went in and there was no heartbeats. So I took the medication again because I knew I didn't want, scar tissue again. So I took the medication. And I think it was kind of the same as the first time. I took it, thought I passed it all. And then a couple of days later, we were actively moving into our house, hauling stuff. And I started clotting, having clots and bleeding a lot. And I wasn't too alarmed just because I had known it had happened the first time. And then I was like, okay, I guess it's just my body didn't expel it all the first time here. I'll be fine. Kept kind of going about our day. And then
Are you suspecting your house at any point? I'm listening to you talk and so I know you're setting this up as this was your last marriage, as you were moving out of your house. And in my head, I'm Okay, so all of these losses happened at that house. Like, how can we not be considering environmental factors here?
And there was mold in that house. Yeah. In my bedroom, I slept in the bedroom with mold along the windowsills for 3 years and didn't really ever think it was an issue. I mean, I don't know that I didn't know much about mold. Honestly, I didn't like, and that is something that my doctors were like, that totally could be a factor. Like, we can't prove that. There's no
Right.
test to say that, like, because I was researching it and it's like, there's no ethical test to determine whether mold affects miscarriages, like, for whatever reason, somehow. And so so we moved out. There was mold and it was on a lake, like 3 feet from the water. So underneath, I'm sure it was a crawl space filled with water all the time. So I'm sure there was mold under there as well. And it's hard because, like, my husband, like, I kind of have a negative view of that house now. It's still a family cabin. And my husband's like, that house is special to me. It's where we brought Fletcher home. And I'm like, I do love that. And we had great memories, but like, I also have really bad memories. Like, it's kind of when we're there in the summer, I don't love staying there. Like,
I don't blame you. It has to be triggering.
Yeah. So it's that's kind of my own hypothesis. Like, my doctor hasn't said, no, that's not what caused it. But like, she's like, we can't prove that. There's no proof.
Right.
But it's very possible. And I've also read that mold can trigger Hashimoto. And so that can be, I think it all kind of stemmed from that. Because Fletcher was no problem, nothing going on with that. And during this time, I mean, I look back now and I had gained a significant amount of weight throughout these 2 years, which is also tied to Hashimoto's, mold toxicity and stuff like that.
Also depression, pregnancy, like all of these things. And so you wouldn't think to look at that.
Yeah. So we were doing our new house, moving into it. I was starting to bleed a lot. And then that night we were going to go see Santa. So it was December again. We were going to go see Santa and brought Fletcher. And I remember standing in line and like, you could feel like gushes kind of coming out. And at one point I was standing in line to see Santa and it went like black. And I didn't pass out, but I was like, something not right here. And so we went home, put Fletcher to bed, and I was talking to my friend who's a nurse, and she's like, Sophie, go into the hospital. And I was like, I don't know if I need to. Like, it's probably just a lot of miscarriage. She's like, you owe it to your little boy to go to the hospital to make sure you're okay. You cannot.
That's a good friend.
Yeah, like, you cannot bleed out from this. So we went to the hospital, and they did a ultrasound, and basically, like, my body was still hanging on part of the placenta, and I would have just kept bleeding and bleeding and bleeding. And so they're like, we have to do a DNC, which at that point I did not want, because I was like, that's going to make it a risk for the next baby. Like, you told me not to have one. And they're like,
right.
Yeah, you have to for your life and your safety. Like, you can't keep this in. You have to get this unhealthy pregnancy out of your body. And so it was like 10 p.m. when we went in. My grandma came over and stayed with Fletcher. And it was just like, I remember when he told me I had to stay overnight kind of for observation. And that was terrifying. Like, I was like, I just felt so bad for Fletcher. I was like, I left my baby at home. Like, I need to go home. And it's like, Sam, then you need to go home. He's like, I'm not leaving you. And I'm like, yes, go home, be with Fletcher. He's like, no. And my grandma's like, we're fine. Like, I got him, whatever. So yeah. So anyway, I didn't even have the DNC that night. They kept me overnight and they scheduled the DNC for the next day. And so then they did that. And again, I don't think they didn't do any test. I don't know if I did testing that time. If I did, it was all normal.
At any point were you like, I can't do this anymore, I'm not trying anymore?
No, honestly, it just like, I think if I didn't have Fletcher, I maybe would have. But like, I really wanted to give him a sibling. That was a really strong drive for me. And I was just kind of determined, like, I don't know. I'm not just having one baby. It's like, I want to have more. I want to give him a sibling. And so, no, it never really did cross my mind. I think maybe it crossed Sam's, but he was very good about like, if you want to, like, I'm here with you. He was a big support throughout the
I just
whole
have to imagine that was scary for him, knowing like, had you not gone to the hospital, like you would have just kept bleeding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that was kind of a scary realization. Like, and so I don't know that I've ever talked to my friend about how I owe her for that. Cause I was being stubborn. I was like, I don't want to leave my little boy at 10 p.m. I put him to bed. I don't need to go to the doctor. So that was my last one. We went to Mayo. Basically, they like told us, you don't have Lyme's and your losses are unexplainable. We can't help you with anything. And that day I had started to get my period, or what I thought was my period. And so I was like, okay, got my period. Like, that's good, I guess. My period came back after a little off. And my husband actually ended up surprising me with a little getaway after the Mayo trip. So we went to Rochester for a night. And then he's like, we're actually not going home. We're going to Stillwater for the weekend. And I was, poor guy, I was like all stressed out because I was like, I didn't know about this. I didn't plan to be away from my baby for 4 nights. Like, and he's like,
Right.
Surprise you. And I'm like, I know the thought is so kind, but I need to know that I'm going to leave my baby for more than a couple nights. So anyway, so he surprised me. We drove to Stillwater after Mayo, and I noticed like my period didn't ever turn into a full-fledged period. And I was like, okay, that's weird. And I was like, we were going to go out and we're like, let's day drink. Like, that's sometimes when we have the most fun is like just go race. That's what we used to do in our early like dating years. We're like, let's do that again. And so like, I want to take a pregnancy test just in case. Like, okay, like you're not going to be pregnant. Like, and I'm like, I just want to be sure. Of course I was pregnant. And so that was like right at the start of our weekend. And so I could tell he was kind of bummed. Like, oh, we're get to have our like partying and like, be wild and free. And I was like, but I'm pregnant. And obviously anxiety started. And right away I called my doctor. This doctor, it was great because like I could reach her at all times, basically. I would just call and leave a message with their clinic, and then they would check their messaging frequently. And she called me Sunday at like 4 p.m. And like,
wow.
And so she was great. So she prescribed me some progesterone right away. I went and picked that up in Stillwater and started it that night. And
were you still maintaining all the lifestyle changes too? Like with the out? Okay.
Yeah, no, by then I had been kind of back on normal food. Obviously they still wanted me to limit sugar and certain things. I wasn't great at following that. Besides gluten, they said because of Hashimoto's to cut out gluten, and so I did do that. That hasn't been too bad. I still am doing that. It's not great, but it's not the end of the world. And so we were there. So then she had me do the progesterone, had me taking thyroid medication and estrogen patches. I remember what else. And then a bunch of supplements, basically, and just frequent testing. I got frequent blood work done, frequent ultrasounds, and it was the longest 9 months of my life, but that baby kept. I don't know, my doctor kind of said, oh, and I was on antibiotics for the Lyme's. That was another thing.
Which is not a typical thing they let you do during pregnancy.
Right. And I took it the entire pregnancy, and that was very scary. I remember being like, what if I'm doing some harm to my baby? And they're like, yes, there are risks, but there's also strong risks that if you don't do it, you won't even have a baby. And luckily, my doctor here in Alec was very good at working with this other doctor. So I was still seeing my OB here, and then Dr. Corey, and she was, I don't know that she might not have agreed with everything that she was doing, but she was very supportive of what I needed. And she's like, Sophie, like, we're gonna do whatever we can to get you a baby. Like, if this is what they think you need to do, I'm going to support you and do that. And
that is such a blessing because so many people don't have that experience with their doctors.
Yeah. Functional medicine versus traditional kind of battle sometimes. Yeah. So I honestly am very thankful for both doctors. Like they both had a huge part in getting Cal here. So taking the antibiotics, I was super sick, which again I think was a good thing because then I knew like I was having symptoms. And so that was helpful for me mentally because then I would, God forbid, I would feel good for an hour. I would not be puking for 1 hour and I'd be like, oh, I lost a baby. Like that's where my head would go. And it was such a catch-22 because I felt horrible. Like I ended up weighing less at the end of my pregnancy than I was when I got pregnant. And so it was just like it was a very rough pregnancy, but we made it and we got induced and we had a little boy, Cal, on October 17th. So he's 15 months now. And so pretty smooth labor. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. Labor was it went fast, but it was at one point his heart rate kept dropping. And so like, they were like, doctor needs to get in here now. We need Dr. Heinrich in here now. And I was like, oh my God, like I remember looking at Sam And I was like, we're going to lose this baby too. And he's like, just breathe. And they like put an oxygen mask on me and be like, you need to calm down. Like you need to breathe deep for your baby. And obviously he was born okay and fine. But yeah, I remember being very scared for probably like 2 minutes there. And again, my doctor was so good and so calming. And she got in there. She's like, we're going to have a baby, Sophie. Like, just take your deep breaths. And I'm very thankful for her. Yeah, once he was born, it was just kind of this surreal feeling of like he was finally here. I remember crying. I remember taking a shower, my first shower after he was born. And when I was pregnant, I would take showers and I would always sit in the tub because I was so nauseous. I would just sit and kind of let the hot water run over me, and it felt kind of good. And during that time, I would pray and just pray for getting a healthy baby and a safe pregnancy. And so when I sat in that shower after I had him, I just broke down and I yelled at Sam, and he was obviously holding Cal in the bedroom, and I was like, bring him in here. He's like, what's wrong? Like, are you okay? I was like, I'm just so happy. Like, he's finally here. And like, I'm not praying for him anymore. He's here in my arms and blah, blah, blah. And so,
oh my
gosh.
gosh.
And then like moment of like, cause I kind of thought like once he was on my chest, I would have that moment. And I cried, but it wasn't like the full on, like, holy
yeah,
shit.
because when you get that baby, like there's a dam of emotions that needs to break and like get free. Oh,
yeah. I mean,
cry.
and I had a friend who had a stillborn, and she's like, Sophie, I can't wait for you to have this baby. Like, you will literally feel a weight off your shoulders. Like, you just
I even texted you on the way home from the hospital with my baby, and I was like, you're next. I know that you're next. Like,
yes, I remember that. That felt good. Yeah. So it was a long 9 months, and my husband would honestly like to be done having kids because it was such a stressful 9 months for him as well, because I was a mess. I would cry quite a bit. And I mean, I remember once I found out that his parents had COVID and we had just been by them, and I was hysterical. Like, I was like, oh my God.
yes.
Because we didn't know what COVID is. Still don't really know what COVID's going to do to pregnancies. And so it was just every other night I was just anxious, and I was obsessively checking. I had a Doppler and I would obsessively check it. And right away I would do it every night before bed so I could like sleep good. And my doctor was like, Sophie, don't do that. Like, do it in the morning. So if you can't find the heartbeat, you can come in. And luckily I don't think I ever had a situation where I couldn't find the heartbeat. There were times where I was like, oh, it's moving a little less, but he was so good at like, come in, just come in. We'll check them out, And so, yeah, it was crazy. And now he is the craziest, most insane little firecracker I could have. I mean, he's just not, so it's fun. But yeah, it was a long 2 years. But now
in that 2-year stretch of things, what do you feel like you learned about yourself?
It sounds cheesy, but it's like I can get through shit that I probably didn't think I could get through. Obviously, I don't ever want to go through it again. I'd prefer not to. But yeah, because there were times where I was like, how am I going to get through this? I mean, honestly, having Fletcher was a huge motivator for me to just get out of bed some days. Because if I didn't have him, I don't know, I had a little boy to take care of. I couldn't just sit there and have pity and feel bad for myself and cry in bed all day, even though I wanted to. And I did that every once in a while, but I couldn't do it every day. And so yeah, I just that there was a strength that I didn't know I had, because I think I've always thought like, yeah, I just wanted to stay in bed the whole time, but I got up. I went about my days, and just I have a new respect for functional medicine. That's something I always kind of thought was not a real thing. My grandpa was a DO in town, and I think there's a healthy balance between the two, but I have a new respect for gut health and all that stuff. I think our marriage got stronger through it too. He was, put up with a lot. And like he has said he's scared to have another baby because of how hard it was for me. It hurt him to see me like that. And so, but I'm like, you know what? If I can do it, you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And they get the easier end of the stick.
Yeah, if I can have a baby, you can have another baby. I get anxious about having another baby, but also like I really were the one. I'm still seeing Dr. Corey. She still monitors my thyroids and my Lyme symptoms. And, you know, I remember asking her, like, what do you think caused my miscarriages? And she's like, honestly, we will probably never know. We just threw whatever we knew at it.
What do you think caused your miscarriages? Because I'm curious how you make sense of it.
I think it was, I don't know. I think she thinks more strongly about the Lymes, but she won't really say it, but I kind of got that sense. I feel like maybe the Hashimoto's, because autoimmune, my thyroid was all out of whack. The more research I've done, you know, mold and all that can trigger all these different symptoms. I mean, I was 20 pounds heavier and like just not healthy. And once I took the thyroid medication, like I lost 20 pounds doing absolutely nothing. Like just like my body was just finally back to normal a little bit. So I think it was the Hashimoto's and the mold in the house. I remember with Cal, that was one thing that I would kind of remind myself, like when I was pregnant with him, I'm like, we're in a new house. It's like new start. And my mom kind of told me that, like, new start, new year. Because it was kind of like, I found out I was pregnant, you know, 2022, like new year, kind of. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it was a wrong 2 years, but it also feels like it was like just yesterday that I had my first son, kind of.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. That's where we're at now, I guess.
So I have two final questions for you. The first one being, what do you think either needs to happen or change in our conversations about health and miscarriages? Because I know both are part of your story.
Mm-hmm. I think women's health just needs to be taken more seriously. You know, to be told by Mayo Clinic, the top hospital in the world, that nothing's wrong with me. I'm unlucky. And then, I mean, you know, I know they probably still would stand by that today because they don't recognize certain things as causing miscarriages. But I knew something was wrong. There was something going on in my body that was not letting me have a healthy pregnancy. And luckily, this Dr. Corey believed that and dug into whatever she could to find a solution. And you know, like I said, we never know exactly what caused my miscarriages, but I have to believe that something we treated was what was causing it. Because
Absolutely.
I have a healthy baby boy after 5 miscarriages. I have a healthy baby boy. I don't know. I can't believe that he was just flukes of 5 in a row, and then he just came after changing, like that, you know, having antibiotics and thyroid medications and stuff like that. So I just think taking women's health more seriously. As far as miscarriages, I think it just needs to be known, like you said, miscarriages are a thing. You know, my body was not going to have the miscarriage on its own. And the last one, I think, was proof of that, kind of, that it just wasn't going to let go and that I needed the medication or the DNC to help with that. And I don't think I ever like knew that was a thing. That, like, I remember being like, well, eventually I have to stop bleeding, right? Eventually all the pregnancy will be out. Like it has to stop. And my doctor was like, no, you're pregnant. The placenta is still attached to the uterine wall and lining, and it is causing constant bleeding. Like, it is blood coming from your body. It is not just like period blood that's happening right now.
Right.
So that was like, I was like, oh shit. Like I had no idea about that. And so again, when people,
and not to turn this political, but you know,
gonna go.
That is exactly what people don't understand and realize, because we are not doctors. We are not trained in how all of this works. And so the medication you took, the DNC, like all of those to like the like uneducated person would be abortions. And they also saved your life because you needed to get the pregnancy out.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, that's where I was when, I mean, it's kind of toned down now, but for a while when I was all over social media about, you know, people banning this, I was like, you don't get it. Like and even if it wouldn't have been about saving my life with the 5th one, just going through the torture of like waiting to have a baby come, you know, when you know it's not alive. I just, that's so hard for me to grasp. And I was like, no, I want to get this over with. I don't want to sit here and just that icky feeling. I don't know. And so even if
100%, I totally get that.
So yeah, miscarriage sucks and it's a lot. I didn't really, I'd heard of people who'd had them, but I never like was like really considered it a trauma, I guess. More now it's like, yeah, that's a trauma, especially. I mean, it doesn't matter how it happens. You find out you're pregnant, you meet, even if you're not very far along. I mean, I do believe that the further along, it does get harder. I've had someone say like, stillborn and miscarriage are the same, and I don't feel that way personally. Obviously, I haven't had a stillborn, but I'm like, I cannot imagine carrying, because that was my biggest fear with Cal, was like, I got to 9 months and I was like, oh my God, like, I cannot imagine losing him now. And I know you had a loss, closer, and like, I don't consider them the same. Some people do, and that whatever, but I cannot imagine losing after carrying so long. Like, I was lucky I only had to carry mine for 7 weeks,
I think that's why we just don't compare traumas, right? Like,
Right.
your trauma is yours and it's valid and it impacted you, and my trauma is valid and impacted me, and I can still have compassion and a broken heart for everything that you went through.
Yeah.
And so on the outside, sometimes people don't know what to do for people who experience pregnancy or infant loss. And so as someone who has gone through that yourself, what would you tell people to do to support a loved one, male, dad in the role or mom in the role? Like, how would you encourage people to help support?
So I had a friend who after I had my 5, all of a sudden she had 3 in a row. And she kind of told me afterwards, she's like she apologized. She didn't need to do this, but she apologized to me. She's like, I did not understand. Like, I had no idea. She felt like she wasn't a good friend, which I would disagree with. But she's like, I just didn't know what to do, and like I didn't do what I was. And I think the best thing was just checking in frequently on how they're doing. Having, I remember a friend, and not that you need to send money or anything, but that friend dropped off a gift card to order pizza one night, because it's like the last thing I feel like doing is like cooking, like, and feeding my family. And so just being there. There's a lot of books out there that I found helpful, that I read, and then I passed on to that friend because now she has a healthy baby girl after her 3 losses. So, and just, I mean, it sounds cliche, but just being there for them and frequently checking in, because you never know when it kind of hits them. And, I know a lot of people thought once I got past 12 weeks that I was in the clear and that I was relaxed and I was going to be fine. And honestly, it was even probably just as hard. I mean, maybe not, the 7 to 8 week mark was the hardest and the scariest. And then, but it didn't ever let up. And I remember thinking in my head, oh, once I get to this, I'll feel better. Once I get to this, I'll feel better. And that never happens. I think pregnancy after loss, you never feel 100% confident again. And it is exhausting to feel that anxiety day in and day out.
Not until that emotional dam breaks do you feel like you get a break.
Yeah. Yep. It's just being on edge for 9 whole months, basically. And, distraction is it's helpful to be like, just invited out, and like it would be helpful to go out, take Fletcher to play dates, because I would get out of the house and I would have a chance to talk. So otherwise I would just sit in the house. I would stay at home, so I'm not working, and I would just sit in here, and kind of my mind would go places, and I was so nauseous all the time that I was just like laying there and not staying active. And I don't know, it's just, yeah, I don't know. It's just find a support as a person who's had them, or finding that support. And not judging people. I know some people judge when people share before 12 weeks. And I tried to kind of say, screw that. I shared on Instagram at 7 weeks with Cal, because I just said, whether you're religious or not, I just need, if you can pray or be thinking of us, like, I just need all the positive thoughts, and I need support. I need people to check in. And so obviously there's certain people I reach out and talk to more, but just knowing people who cared and were thinking about us. But then I have another friend who did not share until probably like 28 weeks. And that was her way of dealing with it too. So I think
there's not a right or wrong way for that. It really comes down to, can you have those conversations about if you lose the baby? Like you said, telling Fletch was hard. And I think that's a lot of the story. It's not that there needs to be shame before sharing. It's just, can you have those conversations? Yeah.
Yep. And to me, it's like, it was hard. Like, I don't know. I knew someone, I felt like I wanted to tell them that because I feel like that was such a big part of my life. If I know them well, I feel like they should know that about me and that I carry that, I guess. But some people are more private, and it's whatever.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Sophie, for sharing this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for letting me. It's kind of therapeutic. So thank you for letting me.
I just think like your story is probably so relatable to so many people who are like hiding it or trying to deal with it on their own. And so again, that's the whole goal of this podcast, is to bring these stories and these hard realities to light so that way we can support each other and really be better.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, I've had people reach out that have had miscarriages that, didn't share it, but have reached out and talked to me about it. And so I've been really glad that I shared it just so they knew they could, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I'm a pretty open book, and just having Cal, it's like there can be a light at the end of the tunnel, I mean, it doesn't happen for everybody, but so that breaks my heart, but it can.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I know that the topics that we talk about on this podcast can be heavy and bring up a lot of emotions for people, and that's no reason to shy away from these conversations. If you're a fan of trying to get these conversations out to as many people as possible, I could use your help. Rating, reviewing, and subscribing to the podcast helps it reach more people. I always love to hear your feedback on the episodes that we put out and the topics that you want to hear more about. So head to www.redbirdcounselingnmn.com. From there, you can send me an email and join our online email community to get more updates about the podcast and everything happening mental health and Redbird Counseling. Be sure to also follow us on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Redbird Counseling MN, and Facebook, Redbird Counseling MN 21. Until next time, remember, you're not alone, your story matters, be kind to yourself, and don't be afraid to color outside the lines.